You're listening to The Luxury Item, the podcast on the business of luxury and the people and companies that are shaping the future of the luxury industry. Here's your host, Scott Kerr.
Phillips is one of the big three global auction houses and specializes in 20th and 21st century art, design, watches, and jewels. It positions itself as a more focused, contemporary-leaning alternative to the other big auction houses. In 2025, it achieved about $927 million in global sales, with high sell-through rates driven by tightly curated auctions and a growing base of younger, often online international collectors. Auction houses like Phillips have been leaning harder into jewelry these days to offset softer art sales, with luxury goods reaching a decade-high market share. My guest on The Luxury Item is Benoît Repellin, one of the most highly respected auctioneers and currently the global jewelry head at Phillips Auction House. Based in Geneva, Benoît leads the house's rapidly expanding global jewels department and its European presence. He joined Phillips in 2022 after nearly a decade at Sotheby's Geneva and has since overseen major auctions and landmark consignments at Phillips, including the 100% sold Vanderbilt family jewels that achieved $4.3 million and record-setting sales such as the Argyle Phoenix Fancy Red Diamond at $4.2 million. Welcome to The Luxury Item, Benoît.
Thank you very much for having me, Scott.
Thank you. I'm very excited to have you. So, you were an auctioneer recently at Phillips' most recent jewels auction in Hong Kong at the end of last month, delivered solid totals, strong Asian demand, particularly from mainland China and Hong Kong, and standout prices for signed pieces from Cartier, Bulgari, and others. A couple of the standout lots included a 4-carat pink diamond ring and a 20-carat yellow diamond pendant necklace. The sale totaled $5.4 million. To me, sounds like a lot. So in your mind, was the auction considered a success?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when we look at an auction result, we want to make sure we deliver on both hands for the consigners and seller side and for the buyers. And there are certain statistics we look at after the auction. So, for example, one of them is the sell-through rate. So that's the percentage of items sold by value and by lot.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the results against the pre-sale estimates, so illustrating the performance of the sale if the lots sold within estimates or above the high estimates, etc. But also the sale participations with the number of bidders, the countries they were coming from, also the way of bidding, because clients can participate in the auction different ways, either with an absentee bid, so they leave their maximum amount before the auction, then they can participate in the room, on the telephone, or also online. And I think the sale participation also really gives indications of the curation of the sale. So if we have a lot of interest on some of the lots, and as you mentioned, and some of the Cartier pieces, Bulgari items, signed pieces, and also some of the colored diamonds, so strong participation from the clients. So that really shows that the curation of the sale met the clients and collectors' expectations.
So outside of the hard numbers, do you ever look at just a vibe of the bidders? Just the feeling from the bidders, whether something excites them about
Yeah, exactly. This is
piece.
what I mentioned about the sell participation. When we see a lot as several bidders and we have like 10, 15, 20 registered bidders, that's also what we want to achieve during an auction, to get this competitive bidding between clients on one lot. And this is what we saw on some of the signed pieces on these colored diamonds that you rightly mentioned.
So as I mentioned before, that there was strong demand in mainland China and Hong Kong. What was the overall feeling about the marketplace in general?
So we have 3 selling locations for jewelry, like Hong Kong, New York, and Geneva.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite usual for our Hong Kong sales to have a stronger participation from Asia, and our New York sales to have a stronger participation from the Americas. And then Geneva is a little bit more international with global participation. So we have participation from all over the world for all of our auctions, but the curation, the time difference, and the locations also influence obviously the participation from our clients.
And over the past few years, there's been a very strong appetite for signed jewels, especially Cartier, Van Cleef & Arpels, Bulgari, and other heritage maisons. I was reading that established collectors are chasing vintage masterpieces and younger buyers are gravitating toward more wearable signed pieces from the late 60s and 70s. What's driving the demand for heritage brand pieces these days?
So indeed, like signed jewelry pieces attract a lot of collectors, and during our last Hong Kong auctions in March, 100% of the signed jewels were sold, meaning like all the jewels from renowned jewelry maison found the buyers. And more than half of these jewels surpassed their pre-sale high estimates. So that really illustrates what you say, like the strong demand for signed pieces. And I think there are like stable consideration. It's not only the signature, it's also sometimes the provenance
Hmm.
and if a jewel is typical of a specific era, or also the quality of the gemstone that collectors take into account.
What kind of price per carat premium does a signature piece carry over unsigned diamonds?
So this is quite difficult to judge because I mean, on the estimate will value, for example, if it's a diamond ring, we will really put the estimate based on the value of the stone, and then the signature indeed will generate a premium on the final price. But this is not really something we'll take into account in the estimate. So it will be for the for the end buyer to give the additional added value to the signature. Obviously, if it's a typical jewel signature piece, if it's more about the design of the piece, there is a premium in this on that occasion. So if it's a signed Art Deco Cartier piece, obviously it will be much more valuable than a standard Art Deco diamond bracelet. But
Right.
for a stone, the value will really be focusing on the stone itself.
So, in your view, what are buyers actually paying for? Is the history, design language, or just the peace of mind of a big heritage house brand?
Well, I guess it's a combination of several factors. And when people ask me, how do you value a jewels? What do you look? You give an estimate to a jewel? I usually say that I look at three different factors: art, nature, and provenance. So nature being the quality of the gemstone, and if the stone is spared from any heat treatment, what is the origin of the gemstone, etc. That really influence the value of the stone. Art, so the craftsmanship, if it's a signed piece as well, if it's typical of the era and the period the jewel was made, and then the provenance, if there is any interesting name linked to the piece of jewelry. And I think collectors really look at these three factors also when they consider a piece at auction and when they decide if they want to go for that piece or not.
So, the signed jewels with historical celebrity provenance, like royal pieces or name collections, estate sales, things like that, do those trigger the most aggressive bidding at auction? And if you could cite an example where that happened?
Absolutely. And I have a lot of examples for for signed pieces on pieces with provenance. I mean, recently in November 2025, we had in Geneva, we offered 12 pieces from the collection of Gladys Moore Vanderbilt, Countess Széchenyi.
Hmm.
And so she was born in 1886 in like the largest mansion on Fifth Avenue. She married Count Laszlo Széchenyi in 1908, and she was considered of one of the last dollar princesses marrying into European nobility. And as part of these 12 pieces, the top lot was what we call the Vanderbilt sapphire. And it was a Tiffany & Co. Diamond and sapphire brooch uh, made so in around 1905, just before her wedding. It was given by Alice Gwynne, Mrs. Cornelius Vanderbilt, to her daughter Gladys on the occasion of her wedding with the Count Laszlo Széchenyi. And it was set with a 42.68 carat cashmere sapphire. So a very impressive stone of royal blue color. Cashmere sapphires, also cashmere being the most desirable origin for sapphires. So
Hmm.
really the jewel combine everything that collectors would be looking for. You have the quality of the gemstone with this important cashmere sapphire of royal blue color, the craftsmanship with the Tiffany & Co. Belle Epoque brooch, very typical of the turn of the century, the beginning of the 20th century, and also the Vanderbilt name. So for this piece, we had 22 bidders on this exceptional brooch, and it sold for 3.6 million US dollars, so more than three times the low estimate.
Hmm.
So I think it's very encouraging to see, obviously, this appetite. And another lot of the collection was a Cartier brooch that was originally part of a tiara that was also given by Alice Vanderbilt to her daughter as part of the wedding basket in 1908. And the tiara was actually worn by the Countess Eugenie Gladys Vanderbilt on the occasion of the coronation of Emperor Charles and Empress Zita as King and Queen of Hungary on the 30th of December 1916. And so the tiara was composed of 8 different lily design brooches, and one of the brooches appeared at auction and it sold for 560,000 US dollars, so 5 times the low estimate after also a competitive bidding between 13 clients.
Millennials and Gen Z now make up a large share of new bidders. It's been reported at major houses, roughly 40 to 46% of new buyers are millennial or younger. And at your house, Phillips, the share of Gen Z and millennial bidders has surged by over 50% in the last 5 years. It seems these young bidders are less reverential about category boundaries and more comfortable treating signed jewelry as a mix of cultural objects and financial assets. I'm sure you've seen a big influx of millennial and Gen Z bidders into jewelry auctions over the past few seasons. How would you describe this new buyer compared with the traditional high jewelry client?
Well, I think probably the first buy of millennials and Gen Z would be more towards like some instantly recognizable design as well, like an Alhambra Van Cleef Naples, a Cartier Love Bangle, or Justin Clouer Panther design. But I think they're also looking at some designer names that meet their taste and aesthetic. And we have some jewels, for example, by Hemele, by Jarre, by Taffin, that are very popular at auction, to name a few. And I think with all the events, also the red carpets events with the Oscars, the Golden Globes, and when people see these celebrities wearing vintage and antique pieces, that
Mm-hmm.
really put the spotlight on these collectible items. And we see more and more younger collectors looking at these brooches, vintage pieces that really reflect the period when they were made. And it's quite interesting to see also the interest on these series like Downton Abbey or Gilded Age that really put, I mean, they really put a big effort in having the costumes, the clothes, and the jewels that really reflect the era of the show. And I think that really put also the spotlight of some Belle Epoque pieces on Art Deco. And it's very interesting to see how the filmmakers really try to respect the right jewels and the right clothes for the set of the film and the movies. Also, sometimes like celebrities, for example, everyone talked about Taylor Swift's engagement ring that was set with an old cut diamond. And I think that we really saw a surge of demand for old cut diamonds after also Taylor Swift showing this engagement ring. And some contemporary designers like Jessica McCormack, for example, really uses these old cut stones and the old setting, and it's very, very popular for Gen Z and millennials.
Are you finding these Gen Z millennials also doing their homework before they start bidding?
Yeah, I think there is definitely an appetite for knowing more about the history of jewel and knowing more about jewelry in general. There is this kind of education side that also all the jewelry maisons have done. When we see all these collections, all these exhibitions about jewelry that are so popular, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it really attracts a very broad range of collectors and public.
Benoît, you're a deeply seasoned high jewelry specialist and auction executive with a rare mix of academic training, gemological credentials, and market pricing instinct. You've worked at the top auction houses, ex Sotheby's. You joined Phillips in 2022 and appointed worldwide head of jewelry in 2023. When you moved up to your current role, where do you see the biggest white space for Phillips between the established jewelry players and new buyers coming into the category?
I mean, I joined Philips in February 2022 as head of Europe before being asked to take a global role. And it was a very interesting challenge for me because being based in Geneva, it was the aim was to rebuild the jewelry department in Europe. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a great opportunity. And we relaunched the jewelry auctions in Geneva in November 2023. And our Geneva Jewels Auction 1 in November 2023 achieved 19.5 million Swiss francs, so approximately 21.6 million US dollars. And from 2022 to 2025, we increased total sales by 87%, bringing the total from $27.7 million US dollars to $51.7 million dollars. So it's really a fast-growing department. We're also building a strong global team, which is very exciting. And it was very encouraging to see also the support of previous collectors and clients joining me on this journey, and also seeing how Phillips can do things differently. I think it's very interesting to be a different player in the industry. We have a very strong identity. Phillips is very much the 20th and 21st century auction house. And I think we position the jewelry department with Phillips identity. We're still offering jewels from the 19th century to today, but we're trying to bring these contemporary twist to it with our marketing campaign, with our editorial shooting, and also to meet clients' expectation to have very curated auctions, really focusing on every single jewelry piece we offer. It's not about really the volume and the number of sales we do, but really about the curation and making sure we meet clients' expectation. And one of the example of doing things differently but still meeting clients' demand is also in May 2026. In May this year in Geneva, we'll launch a collections and provenance section as part of our jewels auction in Geneva, and to celebrate our 230th anniversary at Phillips. So Phillips was founded in 1796. So we're very old maison, but with this very contemporary flair to it. And this collections and provenance section is really to highlight jewels that have a name to it, as we mentioned earlier. Clients are very much looking for pieces that bring some history to it. And this section will offer some more jewels and pieces from Gladys Vanderbilt, Countess Secheny, some jewels and objects from the kings of Bavaria, and then also from important European noble families.
And you're also one of the younger high-profile jewelry auctioneers. You're active on social media with about 100,000 followers on Instagram. You're often posting daily jewels auction behind-the-scenes content and sales highlights. Are you consciously using Instagram to educate the next generation of collectors, or more of just a business development tool?
I think it's really both. As I mentioned earlier, I think collectors are really looking for the education side as well. And it's not only also about the history of jewelry and like the jewelry background and the origin of the gemstone, but also to help the followers to be more familiar about auction. Auction can be a bit of a different world for someone who is not very used to it, and we can show that auctions are also approachable, that our exhibitions are open to the public. And when we see the success of all these jewelry exhibitions around the world by Cartier, Van Cleef, at the V&A, at the Musée de la Marine in France, etc., actually auction exhibitions are open to the public and really show also museum quality items. So I think it's also something that is interesting to show to the audience. And I guess the followers follow, obviously, to be aware of the auctions, to know what's happening next, to have a first hint of what will be highlighted in the next auction. Also to learn about jewelry in general. Some people just want to see beautiful pieces every day, and beauty, I think, is important for the soul. It lifts everyone's spirit. But it's also, as you say, a business tool, because it allowed me to find also some new sellers and buyers through Instagram. I have the example, for example, a follower reached out with a 8.49 carat Burmese sapphire that I estimated conservatively at 35 to 55,000 US dollars, and it sold for $94,500 in June 2022 in New York. But also some buyers, for example, some bidders for the Vanderbilt jewels and objects in November 2025 came through Instagram. And actually, my most popular post ever on Instagram is two small purses from Gladys Vanderbilt, Countess Secheny. One of them was gold and sapphire, and the other one was set with diamonds and rubies. And it was seen 4.9 million times.
Wow!
I was very surprised for these.
Yeah, well, why
delicate.
do you think? Why do you think that surprised you? What do you think attracted them about that post?
I think it was really the interesting objects. They were like very miniature purses, so tiny little delicate 19th century objects. I think it was also quite fascinating for everyone to realize that they were used actually in the 19th century and early 20th century. Everyone was asking also, what did you put in them? Because they're so small. So was it gills? Was it coins? So I think it was really about being part of the life of the 19th century and 20th century in the Gilded Age period of the American and the European nobility, and also the delicacy of the object that were so really fine, and the setting of every stone was really exquisite.
Fine jewelry seems to sit at the intersection of art, history, and finance, similar to fine art, but uniquely wearable and portable, and built for materials, gold, diamonds, and colored stones, whose values can be tracked in global markets. When you look at bidding patterns today, how many clients are treating high jewelry as a hedge or store of value in volatile times versus buying purely for passion?
So we don't always know the reason actually why clients buy at auction, and the reasons can vary a lot from one client to another.
Mhm.
It can be either an occasional purchase for an anniversary, for a specific occasion. It can be also really collectors building a collection and considering jewelry as a collectible category the same way as art, or like really a passion. And some people indeed see the investment side and they want to also build a collection that can increase in value. And some of them actually buy and sell. So when they feel it's the right moment to sell a jewelry piece, they will put it at auction or sell it another way and then buy another one. Because there is always an intrinsic value in the jewel. Obviously, you buy, as you mentioned, it's set with precious stones, it's made of gold and platinum, etc. So there is also this kind of security from some clients in buying jewels. But when people ask me how would you buy a piece at auction, I always say one needs to buy what one likes.
Mm.
And really, the best collections were built over the years with a discerning eye and passion. And I think people shouldn't really look at what they buy just on a pure investment purposes.
Sophisticated collectors always say the secondary market is where you find real value in serious jewelry. So, from where you sit, what do the smartest collectors do differently when they use auctions to build an asset grade collection rather than just, chasing trophy pieces?
Well, I think it's also what I said. It's really about like the discerning eye and the passion. I
Yeah.
think it also meets one of the previous questions about art, provenance, and nature. So really being aware of the quality of the gemstone, looking at the craftsmanship of the pieces, also, and if there is any provenance, also being patient. I think, these collectors have been built over the years, and one shouldn't really look at changing the collection too quickly, but there is definitely an appreciation of the pieces over the years.
So, when you look back at the collectors who've quietly built great collections through Sotheby's and now with Phillips, what common patterns or habits stand out in how they research, bid, and decide when to walk away?
Well, there is not a single way, I guess, to collect
Uh-huh.
and to purchase at auction because each collector is very different, and we definitely see more and more jewelry collectors coming to auction and considering jewelry as a collectible category, as I said, the same way as one would do for art. There are obviously historic jewelry collectors like the Royal Collection, the Kings, the Queens, the Duchess of Windsor, the Barbara Hatton, Liz Taylor, Dizzy Fellows, etc., to name a few. But I think the collection usually reflects the collector's taste, and some would decide to really focus on one jewelry maison, the same way as Cartier or Van Cleef would build their own connection, because the most of the main jewelry maisons have their own collections as well. So Cartier has the collection, Van Cleef, Chaumet, etc. And these maisons obviously want to buy pieces that would illustrate the history of the jewelry house and the evolution of the jewelry and the history of the jewelry. Some collectors have this approach that they really want to focus on one name and have the best of the names. Others really want to have the evolution of jewels, so they would have jewels from even the Renaissance to today. Others would focus on a certain period. They will just want Art Deco pieces or Belle Epoque or 1960s and 70s that are obviously very much coming back to fashion. So I would say it very much depends on the collector.
Jewelry is generally viewed as an intergenerational asset carrying both financial value and family stories. So, how do you see heirs and next gen collectors balancing sentiment with the decision to sell at auction?
It's very interesting indeed to mention the family stories because we mentioned a lot about the provenance already and how
Right.
it can impact the results at auction. But I think for every piece, even if there is not a specific name attached to it, there is a great sentimental value to jewels. And I can really see it every time I see a client coming to me just to get a valuation and maybe deciding to part with it and put it at auction quite automatically when they unpack the jewels in front of me, they will give me the history behind each and every single piece, saying that was the ring from my grandmother that was given by my father to my mother for my birth, etc. So there is really this attachment to the piece itself for all
Mhm.
the sentiment and the emotion it brings. And jewelry is very personal. It's worn obviously by the person. It's close to like worn on the skin, close to the heart for a brooch. It was given for a special occasion by a special person. So it's very interesting to see all of this, and it's also interesting for us to know all the history behind because sometimes it does add value to the piece. When the client contacted me with a name I knew from a very important French noble family, a ducal family. So before I even saw the jewels, I was like, well, with such a name, there should be Chaumet jewels because Chaumet was really
Mhm.
the jewelry maison doing all the wedding baskets, the corbeille de mariage of the high society at the beginning of the 20th century. And it's quite often where in these families where you find an interesting Chaumet piece. And the client showed me a pair of diamond earrings, beautiful pair of earrings, very typical of the Art Deco period. I asked him if he had any, stories, if he knew the origin of the pieces, the stories he gave me were much more anecdotic, but quite interesting as well, saying, "Oh, my wife was wearing the pair of earrings at a wedding, and she came home and realized that actually, oh, she lost one of the earrings, but actually the earring dropped in the jacket, in the pocket of the jacket. So luckily, we still have the two earrings, but they're quite difficult to wear, and we don't really know if we will." We were lucky enough to find it this time, but we don't know if we will keep them forever. So maybe it's time to part with it. And when I looked at the pair of earrings, I recognize a partial maker's mark for Joseph Chaumet. So there was the J, the star, the
Mm.
moon, and the sea. So I asked him, I said, I think it's Chaumet, and the client didn't know at all about the history. I said, would it be possible that was part of the wedding basket of your parents? Because I think it's really from the 1930s. And he told me that his parents got married in 1934. So I asked if I could do further research with Chaumet and asked the Maison if they could find anything in their archives. And Chaumet digged into the archives and they found indeed that the family brought an older brooch, really a Belle Epoque brooch set with diamonds, that they asked to dismantle it to do this pair of earrings. And it was delivered to the family in June 1934, and his parents got married in July 1934. So it was indeed part
Wow.
of the wedding basket of his parents. And it's fascinating when you can also bring back the history of the jewels when it was lost actually through generations.
So did they move ahead and did they bring
They
it to
did
auction?
move ahead. Yes, they did move ahead. We did offer it last year at auction, and the pair of earrings sold for 137,000 US dollars, 114,000 Swiss francs, more than double the high estimate, thanks to also obviously all the history behind it and the Chaumet signature.
So the story behind it, which was new to them, really didn't convince them to keep it. They went ahead with the auction.
Indeed, yeah.
So when a historic or named jewel comes to auction, how consciously do you think about placing it into the next chapter rather than just achieving the highest price?
Obviously, we act on behalf of the sellers, so we want
Right.
it to achieve the highest price. We really want to make sure we give the best exposure to the piece. I think when we present it for auction, we want to put the piece back into its context to make sure people understand the history, the provenance, that it's a collectible object. But as I mentioned earlier at Phillips, we also have this contemporary way, and we want to really present the jewel as as an object, as art, as collectible, but also jewels are meant to be worn. And some collectors do wear their jewels. Some really keep them as works of art indeed. But I think jewels are meant to be worn, and this is what we're trying to do with also the our editorial campaign with model wearing jewels in a more contemporary way. And I think this has a great resonance with our audience and our collectors.
Phillips, Sotheby's, and Christie's all sell high jewelry at a serious level. Sotheby's and Christie's are still the big ships, while Phillips is the fast growing specialist challenger. And you touched a little bit about this before. How do you think about the sweet spot for Phillips jewels versus the historic dominance of Sotheby's and Christie's, from price point, client profile, geography?
Indeed, it's a challenging market and we have like strong competitors, but I think one of Philips' strength is really also its size. We have only 6 departments. So we have modern and contemporary art, design, photographs, editions and works on paper, watches and jewels. So really focusing on 20th and 21st century. And I think it's really one of our strengths because we get to know our clients, we get to know our colleagues as well. So we can really work with colleagues from other departments on special collections. We have also only 3 selling locations for jewelry, Geneva, Hong Kong, and New York. And we have 2 live auctions a year per location and 2 online sales a year per location. So altogether, we have 6 live auctions and 6 online sales. So that allows us to have a curated approach. We want to make sure our sales are not too big either. We want to have 100, 150 lots per sale, really focusing on every single lot and giving the best promotion to each lot. And I think this really resonates with our clients. We're also a little bit more accessible, I guess, and some people like this approachable view of Philips that allows us to give the best service to our clients on the seller side and the buyer side.
And next month, you have 2 jewelry auctions, both in Geneva. One is online and the other is live. What is the focus of those 2 auctions?
Indeed, we have 2 sales, one on the 11th of May, which is our Geneva Jewels Auction 6. And as I mentioned earlier, this sale also will introduce a new section dedicated to collections and provenance, celebrating our 230th anniversary, and to really meet clients' expectations about pieces with provenance and interesting names attached to it. But we also have like some very important signed pieces on some iconic design. One of them, and it's our cover lot, is a zip necklace by Van Cleef and Arpels. So the zip design was stayed to be influenced by the Duchess of Windsor. And the first one realized by Van Cleef was in 1951. It took them decades to come up with the design that can be a proper zip, but also be worn as a jewel. And this is a newer example from 2012 set with coral, chalcedony, and diamonds. It's a very interesting piece. We have also some mystery set pieces, also by Van Cleef and Arpels. So Van Cleef, like patented this technique in 1933 that's also like very much linked to the brand now, and we have a pair of ruby and diamond earrings and a ruby and diamond ring with this mystery setting. Also some iconic jewels from Chaumet Belle Epoque. One of them is ruby and diamond ring, and there is also a negligee necklace also from a French noble family. A Buccellati bracelet, very typical of its design from the Italian Maison. So we really have these two interesting aspects in the auction, I would say, about the sign and iconic designs, and then the collections and provenance.
How far in advance do you create a theme for the auction?
It, I mean, we have auctions regularly, so usually it's really like one auction is over, we're already working on the next one. But sometimes also it takes longer for clients to decide to part with their collection.
Hmm.
So in that case, we can also build an auction around a specific collection. So we don't really know in advance. It depends on obviously what we find for the next auction, the clients we meet. And the collections and provenance was something that I've been thinking for some time. And I think with the 230th anniversary of Philips, it was the perfect occasion to launch this section. I knew that the Vanderbilt family also wanted to part with a few more objects and jewels, so I thought it was a good base, obviously, for this section. Then we had an avid collector, absolutely passionate about King Ludwig II of Bavaria, that contacted us and wanted to also put some of his jewels and objects at auction. So that was already a solid base with some interesting names to bring to collectors. And then it's really about the what we call the business getting when we meet the clients and when we find the property. There were several noble collections from Italy and France that also came for sale. So that was a good addition to this section.
Well, Benoît, my final question is the luxury item question, which I ask all my guests. So if you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only have one single luxury item with you, what would that luxury item be? Can't be any form of air or water transportation to get you off that island or anything that requires mobile service so you can call someone at Phillips to come get you off that island. It's just you on this lonely island. You're all by yourself, palm trees, sand, ocean, coconuts. What would the one, but you do have one single luxury item. What would that one single luxury item be?
Well, that was quite a tough question indeed to answer. And one item, I mean, as you can probably hear, I really like provenance. I am also an historian and an art historian, as well as a gemologist. So I like really the combination of history, art history, the craftsmanship, and the gemstone. So I think the perfect object that will also be useful would be the sword of Napoleon, but with the Radiant diamond set back on the hilt. So the Radiant diamond is this 140.64 carat diamond that was discovered in 1698 and then bought by Philippe, Duc d'Orléans, the regent of France, in 1717. And it's part of the French crown jewels. And it was set by Nito with an additional 42 diamonds on the sword of Napoleon that was made by Jean-Baptiste Claude Audiot. So I think it's really like a beautiful object with the silversmith, the work of the gold with the beautiful Radiant diamonds. So I can really play with it and see how the sun interacts with the facets. It can probably help me also even like light up a fire if the sun like reflects to some of the diamond facets. And obviously the sword will help me hunt, fish, and defend myself if any enemy comes to this beautiful desert island.
I'm curious as how are you going to keep it safe on the island? Like where are you going to store it?
Oh, I'll sleep on it. No one will be able to approach it. That's too valuable. It has like all the French history like with it, with the Radiant diamond, with Napoleon's sword, and like Nito, Audiot, all the great names of the silversmith and jewelry. So no one will be able to touch it.
Benoît Repellin, worldwide head of jewelry at Phillips Auction House. Thank you so much for joining me on the luxury item.
Thank you very much for having me, Scott. It was lovely to discuss with you.
That's it for this episode of the Luxury Item Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful and entertaining, I would be really grateful if you can share it with a friend or colleague. I would love it if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. The Luxury Item Podcast is a production of Silvertone Consulting. I'm your host, Scott Kerr. Until next time.